Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We've talked a little bit about polling this week. Snapshots in time. But there are some trend lines that are worth noting. They're generally very favorable to Trump and Republicans at this point, as we noted, when you have favorability for Democrats at an all-time high, and this is institutions like CNN conducting the polling and reporting on said polling. The favorability for Democrats all-time low, I should say 27, 29% we saw this week. Now, again, Republican favorability is in the mid-30s, so it's not like it's a beloved institution either, but there's more. Basically, as we've seen for the last decade, this is the distribution of favorability among honkies as it pertains to Trump. White men with no college degree, 40 plus 41. Trump is plus 41 favorable to unfavorable among white men with no college degree. White men with a college degree, plus 1. 40-point difference. White women, no college degree. Trump is plus 14. White women with a college degree, he's minus 38. 52-point difference. Gosh, what is the... What do you think connects those numbers? Maybe it's something to do with a college degree and what happens at the collegiate level, in addition to who's oriented to go to college and what's happening in those areas which happen to be wealthier and more suburban. Right. Well, the good news, as I've been saying for a long time, and as Trump has advanced this cause with his victory, those awfuls, angry white female leftists in the suburbs with their degrees in art history from Vassar, they're increasingly irrelevant thanks to the progress that Trump and Republicans have made with respect to other constituencies like Latinos and blacks. Rui Teixeira, over at the Liberal Patriot, writing this week, and again, man of the left, academic, Democrats did worse in the 24 election than you think. You know how the radical revolutionary element in the Democrat Party is trying to minimize what happened in 2024? It wasn't that much of a blowout. It was close. The splits in the look at how narrow the House is and so forth. Only won the popular vote by 1.5 points. Okay. Rui Teixeira has a different perspective. What's happening is that less engaged voters are becoming more Republican. That's a problem when Democrats are always promoting higher turnout, because the higher the turnout, the more these voters show up, and the worse it is for Democrats. Hoist by their own petard because they've denigrated their brand. This is consistent with this Vox.com story that was out this week, or analysis that was out this week, that had every registered voter voted, Trump would have won the popular vote, not by 1.5 points, but by 5 percentage points. Wow. Teixeira goes on, Hispanics are overwhelmingly moderate to conservative in ideology. It's been well documented that Hispanic conservatives have begun shifting dramatically to the right in their voting patterns. But the Shore's data, the Vox.com story that we referenced, now establishes that Hispanic moderates are joining that party that move right. 24-point decline in the Democrat advantage among this group from 2020 to 2024. Since 2016, there's been a total 46-point margin shift away from Democrats. Hispanic moderates are now voting very similarly to white moderates. Immigrants, the Vox.com data also indicate immigrant voters swung from plus 27 Biden to plus 1 Trump. Plus 27 Biden to plus 21 Trump. The Vox.com analysis also suggests that Trump outright won voters under 30, to which Teixeira says, he said wow to the immigrant swing, double wow to the under 30. Also, Gen Z voters under 25, regardless of race or gender, are now more conservative than the corresponding millennial voters. So much for the Democrats' generational tsunami. So you go ahead and be the party of the distaff Brahmin constituency in this country, the housewives of Hinsdale and Highland Park. Go ahead. You can have them. For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Salena Zito. She's a national political reporter. Check out her latest, always, at selenazito.com. And she's got a new book, Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump and the Fight for America's Heartland. That's going to be available this summer, July 8th. The book is called Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump and the Fight for America's Heartland. So, you want to pre-order that. Salena Zito, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Oh, hey, thanks so much for having you. Reading that report the other day, I just kind of smiled because I thought, well, had anybody been reading me, they would have known this already.
Yeah.
Because I came on your show and I talked about it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This shift has been happening beginning in 2014, very incrementally, in particular among Hispanic and Black voters, but also among young people. And each year it just ticked further right. And oftentimes what pushed these voters right was not the Republicans in as much as the Democrats, who had just completely lost and became untethered to what was important to voters. And the Republicans, in particular, with Donald Trump and at the head of the party, but also with bringing J.D. Vance to the forefront, really understood what was very intuitively what was on the minds and what was bothering voters. That's and people will find this out on the very granular level when they get Butler, because I was out there reporting this. I was also 4 feet away from the president when he was shot, and talked to him the next day and 17 times after that. But what I think, about white suburban female voters, and I have a story coming out about this later on today. There is something in there that people aren't understanding, and that is the marriage gap.
Oh, yeah.
So if you are a female suburban voter, in particular under the age of 45, you voted for Trump.
Wow.
If you're married.
And if you're not married?
If you're not, it went the other way.
Well, the other thing, too, is, just getting into those numbers, because I have a little bit, the married versus unmarried, then you also have to go, particularly in the wealthier suburban enclaves, then you have to go to the married versus divorced and remarried, or just divorced.
Right.
So there are gradations there, because I don't know if you've heard, but divorce engenders a lot of anger. Sometimes there's a bit of transference. It seems to me, this is my Fraser Crane psychoanalysis from afar, but there's a little bit of transference of the anger, maybe from the particular incident to their left-leaning politics, or to men in general. I don't know, but there is a divide even between the married and the unmarried, but those who are divorced.
Yes, and I also think we need to think about where the suburban voter is located, male or female. If they say there's two suburban voters, two males. Let's just say male. Two male suburban voters. They both went to Harvard. They were roommates. One went back home and lives in Western Pennsylvania or in Wisconsin or Michigan and has a successful career. The other one lives in the 10 counties that surround Washington, D.C. where you live also impacts how you vote, right? And the concentration of sheepskins versus deerskins, right? People that hunt.
Yeah. Yes.
So counties matter, and a county in Virginia or in Maryland is not going to have the same electoral significance as a county in Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Michigan or North Carolina or Arizona, right? So those details matter as well.
Right. They're not going to have the significance because they don't have the same level of electoral competition, which reduces their significance. It's sort of like what we've seen in Illinois as there's that bandwagoning effect. There's the Republican in Cook County. What's the point? Now it's like Republican in Illinois. What's the point? Because we've lost the collar counties as well.
Right.
Now,
Exactly.
in your article in the Washington Examiner, you introduced us to a man named Gino, and you're not using his last name, but he's a Democrat, but he doesn't understand his own party right now. So what are they doing to win over voters who left them?
Well, they're sort of at the hands of the National Party, and I also interviewed Rotini, and they're really frustrated because the National Democrats get all of the attention, right? And so you see the burning of Tesla cars and people applauding it or laughing at it, which is sort of an invisible nod to say, yes, this is okay. But they also see, who has the loudest voices in their party. Well, it's Chris Murphy from Connecticut. It's AOC from New York. It is Jasmine Crockett from a very packed plus 28 D seat in Democrat seat in Texas. It's your governor. They are speaking for Democrats from states where they never have to once win over a Republican or an independent or a conservative Democrat to win a race. So therefore, their message is extraordinarily different than a Democrat from Pennsylvania. And they understand they're not winning hearts and minds with the message that is coming out from the National Party.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you had that strategy session a couple weeks back. I think it was in Northern Virginia, hosted by Steve Jobs' widow, and it came out of that basically the idea was, let's not make a spectacle of ourselves as lunatics who are obsessed with men being in girls' spaces and so on and so forth. That's probably not a good path. The problem is there's really no space for that with where the critical mass of the party is, and with all guns trained on Trump and Musk, and the way that sort of feeds on itself to platform sort of increasingly intemperate performative events like that spill out into violence, as it almost always does. And what it seems to me they think, the Chuck Schumers of the world, is, well, we can just then, don the cloak of the moderate, of the peacemaker, of the conciliator. We need to bring this country together. So they want to exacerbate division, and then come the midterms, they're all going to be uniters and peacemakers. But I think that two-step is not working for them anymore. And I think there are more and more people that have tuned in long enough to understand the ruse that it is.
Right. So our cultural curators, what do I mean by that? People that are in charge of basically what filters what comes through our culture, big media, corporations, institutions, academia, things like that. They have the sort of the cloak has been pulled away from their faces, and people can now see, and it's very transparent to them, that they are looked down upon, in particular among their own party. That is why the working class went to the Republican Party. The Democrats since 1930 had owned the working class, and it was called the New Deal Democrats. and they had owned them for almost 100 years, and they dropped the ball. They stopped. They became the party of the elites, and you never win an election unless you have the majority of the working class supporting your candidate.
Salena, I wanted to ask you about your new book that's coming out. I mean, you could pre-order it now, but it's coming out in July. Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump and the Fight for America's Heartland. We have a good friend of the show. He called in because he was at the rally in Butler, and he was behind Trump. And after the shooting, he had like PTSD, couldn't sleep. And he said everything changed when Trump went back to Butler and had, kind of a do-over so that he finished. And he said that he felt so vindicated, so relieved. How did you feel when you went back for the second rally?
Well, so I went, I interviewed him that day, and he was, and you'll find this out in the book, but I will say he was very emotional that day. It was almost like a revival at that event. Mm-hmm. I got out there at 5:30 in the morning because I had to do a hit on Fox News, and already the road to get in there was 3 miles long, backed up to traffic. It was pitch black, and I would argue that July 13th changed everything. The country changed after that day. Mm-hmm. And I think October 5th put a period on the end of that, if you had any doubt. And President Trump changed too, very much so. And obviously, I don't want to give the book away. I interviewed him a dozen more times after that. He called me the day after the shooting because I was just standing right by him in the buffer. I was supposed to fly with him to Bedminster to do an interview. And the first thing he did, I will tell you this, the first thing he did was call me the next morning and say, "Salena, are you okay?" Oh. And I was like, "Sir, you were the one who was shot. I'm okay." It went over my head, but I was not shot. So I think you can see through this book how he changed, but also how my state changed, which is very reflective of things that would happen in Michigan and Wisconsin and Nevada and Arizona. Everything changed in that moment.
I think the left underestimated how iconic that moment was, particularly Trump's reaction after he was nearly assassinated. But my question to you is sort of your intuition, since you've been ahead of the learning curve here for a while. How sticky is support beyond Trump? In other words, let's say this adjustment period that he and Bessent have been talking about with respect to tariffs and the transition away from government funding money to actual real private sector investment. Let's say it's bumpier than they anticipated, and the economy doesn't chug along as well as they would hope and like. Do a lot of these Republicans of recent vintage, they probably stick with Trump for a good measure of time, maybe the rest of his term, regardless of what happens. But what about going forward? Do you think that this shift is happening, that is happening, is beyond cult of personality?
Oh, yeah, and definitely, because, and let's just talk about J.D. Vance for a second. He speaks he speaks very differently than Trump. He has a different perspective. He's from Appalachia. He went on to be very successful. He was in the Marines. He also understands the working class in a very intuitive way. And so, in terms of bumpy with Trump voters, I just spent 8 hours in a steel mill the other day. These voters aren't going anywhere, and they expect things to be bumpy. But they understand there is a mess, and he is a man on a mission to clean up that mess. And cleaning up messes sometimes isn't a pretty scene, right? But they, I think if they continue to hold on to the working class, which I see that's what this party is doing, then going forward, they're the party to watch out for.
Salena Zito, national political reporter. You can always check out her latest reporting at selenazito.com. And again, the new book available in July 8th, but pre-order it now. Butler, The Untold Story of the Near Assassination of Donald Trump and the Fight for America's Heartland. Salena, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Oh, thank you. Always a pleasure. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
That shot was money, Lisa. Hey, speaking of, did you ever figure out what to do with your parents' old coin collection?
Not yet. I need a reputable dealer to appraise them. I have no clue what they're worth.
I just finished working on my dad's estate collections. I took it all to Fox Valley Coins. Their customer service was the best. Plus, they're super honest and reputable, but most importantly, experienced. They'll give you the best prices.
Really? They handle estate collections?
Absolutely.